Hello and welcome. You are listening to Sons of Ours podcast. My name is Ian Wintering.
And I am Micah Flores.
So, it has been, I know we say this like every time, but it's been super crazy.
A while. Yeah,
just like it's been crazy. For those of you that don't know, Denver does something different than most dioceses, and they get their third theologians get ordained to the transitional diaconate in February.
Rather than, usually it happens in May or June or July. But,
right, over the summer, basically.
Right.
But they do it mid-semester here at the seminary, so all my classmates, including our co-host Tony Davis, got ordained.
Tony Davis.
Got ordained to the transitional diaconate. So now Julius, who was on the episode a couple weeks ago, if you remember that, him and I are the only lay guys in third theology.
Yep.
So we got to wait till the summer. But
yeah, it was really cool seeing those guys get ordained. Yep. And Tony actually preached a mass at the seminary yesterday.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yesterday. So we already got to hear Deacon Tony Davis homily from the pulpit. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his homilies are basically how he acts on the podcast. It's not really any different.
Yeah.
So
now Tony, that's one of the great things about Tony Davis is Tony Davis no matter where he's at.
Oh my gosh.
But we have a great guest with us today, coming all the way from Helena, Montana, and his name is Kyle Tannehill.
Yes.
Heyo.
This is the third guy from Helena, Montana that we've had on the podcast.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was Tyler, then Matt,
Then
now myself.
Yep.
Wow, in chronological order.
Oh,
How
yeah.
about that?
Yeah.
Nice. You planned that, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Everything is planned out in like 6 months. No, years in advance.
Yeah, right.
That first weekend, we just planned out like everything, every podcast that we were going to do for the next.
Yep, and we've been right on schedule.
Yeah, right. As you've noticed. Yeah. But unlike most of that Helena guys, he didn't go to Carroll College. Where'd you go to college?
Yeah, I think it's just me and Dylan that didn't go to.
Oh, yeah,
well,
Dylan
also
too. Oh, Dylan,
Caleb
yeah.
now.
Caleb, yep.
But yeah, most of the guys in recent past have all gone to Carroll. So I am an alumnus of Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana. Go Cats, go. 4 years in the marching band.
Yeah.
I was in every other musical group you can imagine too.
Yep.
Yeah. So I got an undergrad degree from Bozeman. Music education was my degree.
Yep.
So
Nice.
Also, this is very exciting because Kyle is one of the guys who actually did the music for this podcast.
Oh, that's
right.
And now he's on it.
Yeah.
That music at the intro, that was him.
What'd you guys name it again? 8:30?
I think it was 8:05.
8:05.
Yeah, so this is going to be super nerdy, but time signature in music usually is divided by however many beats are in a measure,
right,
and then what kind of beat is in that measure. So we wrote the podcast tune in what's called 5/8. So
which is like that's a hard measure to write music in.
So
right?
it's an irregular meter because it doesn't have like a clean sense of a steady beat.
Right.
So for you listening at home, there's your music theory lesson for the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is great. So I was in the spirituality year with Kyle, right? So we that's the first year in seminary when Kyle and I both came here. We were the same year. I jumped ahead because I already went to college seminary, but it was just so funny because he was like the music guy in our class. Like I still just remember like praying in the chapel one day.
Except
and then
for Harold. Harold was a...
Well, he's the opera singer, right?
Right.
We got Kyle, though, who's like the music
the
theoretician.
Yeah.
But I just remember one day being in the
Kyle's
chapel.
giving a play-by-play while Harold's
yeah.
He's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Harold just did that. That was crazy.
Right. Yeah. And explaining why it's crazy. And And
then we're like, all right, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Harold's really good at this too. There's been a couple times where I asked Harold a question because he was explaining about why that was a really creative piece of music, and he said like something really simple, and then I was like, "What?" that doesn't make sense at all. And then somehow, because he's a physics guy too, like he's just a really brilliant mind, and so he used like what his knowledge about airwaves and everything to explain the reality of like what was happening. My mind was just blown. It was really cool.
Right. Yeah, it's like one of the distinct memories I have is in SY. I was praying in the Christ the King chapel, and I just kind of hear this noise that I can't really figure out what it is. And I go down into the catacombs, which is the basement under the chapel, and there Kyle is in one of the little side rooms just playing the trombone. Just
Nice.
boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, I just remembered this actually, but there's a really funny story from Ian and I's SY class. So it was like the first week of seminary, and I was cantor that week. And see, it's so funny. Ian just laughs at the
I know exactly what it is.
Yeah. So I thought night prayer started at 9 p.m. So I was being all, a good seminarian.
Showing
Going to the I was like, I'm gonna go to the chapel early. I'm gonna do some quiet prayer before night prayer. I'm gonna put up the numbers on the board, and I'm walking through the hallway to the chapel doors, and I'm like, that's weird. I think I just heard Father Jim say, "God, come to my assistance," and so I'm kind of like bustling into the chapel. And as soon as I open the doors, they finish the beginning of night prayer, and I'm supposed to be there to intone the tune for the night prayer hymn. So I grab the door, and Father Jim ends the intro, and I just go, Te Luci Sante Termine. Oh my gosh.
There were a bunch of us that were sitting in the back of the chapel that witnessed this. So we're all just like, getting into night prayer. Didn't realize the cantor wasn't there. All of a sudden, the doors bust open, and I see Kyle with this look on his face and goes, Te Luci Sante Termine. Oh my gosh.
There was one guy in the back row that just stuck his face in his breviary and laughed for the entire night prayer. I don't think he said a single antiphon or a single line of that song.
Yeah. It was all the people in the back row and Father Jim, because everybody else knew.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, so there's always so much stuff like that happens. It's like
Chapel
for us seminarians,
hijinks.
for some reason, it's just like hilarious.
Right.
And then all the other guys are like, "Okay, cool." No, but awesome. So, Kyle, you what year in seminary are you?
This is my 4th year of 7. So at Christmas, I'm officially half a priest. 3.5 years. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So you and Ian's SY was then 4 years ago, and that so three and a half.
3 years.
3.5.
I mean, 3.5.
Yeah,
3.5, 4 years, right? And so you're in first theology then.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. That's right.
Cool.
Yeah, we got first, second, third here to represent.
First, second, third theology.
All
Yep.
3. Look at that.
Cool. And did you went to college in Bozeman, but did you grow up in Bozeman or where in Montana?
I grew up kind of in the northwest corner of the Diocese of Helena and the state. So the diocese is basically everything west of Bozeman in Montana. So it's like the western third of the state. I'm from Kalispell, Montana. God's country, as they say. So I went to high school there, Flathead High School. Flathead because it's in the Flathead Valley, which is named after the Flathead Indian tribe. There's a lot of different reservations up there. The Flathead is one of them. Kalispell is pretty close to the Blackfoot Indian Reservation as well.
Ooh.
So a lot of things kind of have fancy Native American names.
Right.
Kalispell has like 28,000 people.
Yeah.
So
It's right on the border. Is it right on the border?
it's like,
but it's by Glacier National Park.
So it's like 2 hours ish south of Canada, and like 45 minutes from the west entrance into Glacier National Park. Yeah, so
Wow.
I grew up in a pretty beautiful area. Grew
Yeah.
up skiing, hiking. My family
Hanging out in
wasn't
Glacier.
super outdoorsy, but
Yeah.
we definitely.
But just
took
by the
advantage.
nature of where you are,
Right?
Yeah.
If you're in Montana, you just kind of
Right.
it just happens.
Yeah.
Like there's
Yeah,
almost
exactly. It's such a beautiful area.
Yeah.
I'm totally biased, but I definitely prefer our diocese as compared to the Eastern Diocese. It's just all plains over there.
Oh,
oh
because
yeah,
they have the mountains.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But so you're from Kalispell, and then what's your family look like? Do you have how many siblings you have?
Yeah. So
yeah.
my dad has been a car dealer for the longest time. He owned his own business for a few decades, and now he's selling new cars
Nice.
in town. And my dad's name is Tom. My mother's name is Lisa. My mother has been a school teacher for, as long as I can remember. She's taught pre-first, first grade, second grade, third grade. So she's been kind of all over in the
what
lower
a vocation.
regions.
Yeah. That's
Exactly. They both live in Kalispell still. And then my sister, I have one sister, her name is Kelsey, and she lives in Spokane, Washington, and she's a physical therapy assistant. PTA.
Nice.
Got it.
oh wow.
Had to say it kind of slow. Yeah. Yeah, so it's just the
If she
four of
lived
us.
here, then I could go visit her.
Yeah.
And pay her money to
Exactly.
do her job.
Yeah. Well, she actually specializes in traumatic brain injury
Oh, okay.
therapy. So
Oh.
like stroke victims. And
Wow,
other
she has a
sorts of-
very
Yeah.
specific specialty. I didn't.
Right. Well,
pretty cool.
I don't know if it's like her degree was specialty, but it's more just like the hospital, St.
Right.
Luke's, where she works
Okay.
in Spokane Valley.
Okay.
Like specializes in traumatic brain injury stuff. So
Wow, that's
Right.
powerful. That's
yeah,
intense.
it is super
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah, it's beautiful to hear her speak about
Your
caring
job,
for patients
yeah.
and stuff. Yeah,
Cool.
Totally.
Nice. Yes. So so after college, you took after your mom a little bit then, huh?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that really convicted me while I was in school was I don't think I could ever be in a non-Catholic school. So like I said, I was studying music education, but I just had this sense that public education, not like it's bad per se, but that the thing that I couldn't be able to do was express my faith openly, which
Right.
kudos to my mother. I mean, she's a faithful Catholic,
Yeah.
been in the public schools, and yeah, she just like doesn't have the opportunity to be able to like share
Right.
that with the kids according
Right.
to law. So
Yeah.
something
which is
I knew
crazy.
about something I knew about myself was that I had to be, if I was going to be a teacher, I had to teach in a Catholic school, because it was just that important to me to be able to not only like express my faith, but be able to impart my knowledge of the faith to the kids.
Right. And just grow in like real relationship rooted in Christ, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, the Lord used it too to kind of usher me off to seminary. I have this very distinct memory of
Wait, so you were teaching after college, and what did you teach?
yeah.
you
So
taught-
I taught music,
Okay.
K through 8th grade, general music, and then
Oh wow.
God bless your
Oh,
soul.
man.
yeah, you learn a lot about yourself when you stand in front of
a little-
30 kindergartners or
Just
whatever.
playing the little plastic flute thing.
The recorder, yeah.
Recorder.
Yeah, recorder.
Hot cross
Recorder,
bones, baby.
that's- yeah.
That's all I learned as far as music goes.
If only it
Hot
sounded
cross
like
buns
hot
recorder.
cross buns. Yeah. Yeah, so I taught K through 8 general music, and then 6th through 8th grade band, which was kind of my specialty.
Cool.
Yeah, because my primary instrument is trombone, like Ian was saying.
Boop, 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 boop.
Yeah. And then I actually taught at the little Catholic school in my hometown. It's a parochial school hooked on to my home parish, St. Matthew's.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So it was crazy. Like a bunch of the ladies that live in the office would be like, I remember you when you were just getting baptized. Or
Right.
It's like, okay.
Push your baptismal record.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny.
But it was really beautiful to be at home and have the Lord begin to foster a sense of vocation. I never attended St. Matt's as a student, but in that setting, the Lord, So,
right, you're at home. You're like, it's where you came into the faith, where you received all the sacraments, and so there's something there. That,
and the Lord, I have this very specific memory of the Lord like fostering a sense of spiritual fatherhood at the school.
Oh, wow.
So there was this one day, and it was I love how the Lord works in the mundanity of things, but there was one day when I was just coming back from the office to my classroom, and there's this little first grade girl, Abigail, and she just looks up to me and goes, "Hey, Mr. T." My last name is Tannehill, so the kids called me Mr. T.
I didn't way too hard to pronounce.
Yeah, exactly. So I didn't have a mohawk, unfortunately, but I did.
Wait, who?
Pity fools.
Oh, yeah, Mr. T's like a wrestler, isn't he?
Yeah, I pity the fool. Yeah, but the Lord used that moment, and it just pierced my heart. Right in that moment, she just said, "Hey, Mr. T," and I remember looking at this kid, going, "Whoa, I feel like important in your life. I feel like somebody you look up to.
Right.
I feel like a father to you," which was kind of the rumblings of my sense of vocation. I mean, the Lord uses any sort of mundane thing that comes up in your life to
simple
draw,
greeting.
to draw you to Himself. Beautiful.
Yeah. So that was kind of like one of the. Had you thought about it before, or was that the first time you thought about the priesthood then?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had. I was always kind of the strange kid that liked talking about the faith. My family would even call me Father Kyle when I was growing up, and I was like, I kind of hated it, but yeah, I mean, it sort of makes sense. I didn't go, like I said, I didn't go to Catholic school, but I would go to RE with the Catholic school kids, religious education. I remember going through confirmation class and just having like a huge sense of wonder and awe about all of these things, and kind of looking around and being like, isn't everybody else sort of like really amazed at what God is doing? And
everyone's like, I can't wait to leave.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So I always kind of thought that was odd, and so I think the Lord was sort of fostering a sense of religion in me from a really young age.
Right.
But then it didn't really get rolling until I had thought about it a little bit in college, and then while I was teaching, I was pretty convicted that I think I need to go and look at this. You know, like in the gospel, where the disciples, the apostles, come up to Jesus and they say, "Master, where are you staying?" And he just says, "Come and see." And I was just like, yeah, okay, I need to do that. So I think one of the things I really want to impress upon listeners is that a sense of vocation doesn't have to be completely polished or furnished or realized when you're pursuing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something that the Lord really worked well with me in is that I was largely ignorant of the things of the Catholic Church, not necessarily like all her teachings. I was faithfully practicing as well as I could the sacraments in school, but I came to seminary and basically was a fish out of water, you know?
Yeah. Especially if you in religious ed class in most of your life, you were like the one person who was practicing and like trying to share the faith with,
Yeah. I mean, I hope that my peers were practicing as well, but it always seemed like nobody really like
was engaged.
Yeah. Right. And I was like, why not?
Yeah.
You know? There was always this sort of voice, if you will, kind of in the back of my mind, deep in my soul, just sort of whispering to the heart. Yeah. But yeah, I like to tell people I came to seminary on a whim, because I had called the vocation director, Father Mark Lenneman, And yeah, I was just kind of wrestling with the question, should I go? Should I stay? And Father Mark said, when you think about going to seminary, do you get fired up? And I was like, yeah. And that was it, you know? I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to go do this seminary thing, you know? So there was no,
sounds exactly like Father Mark.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you get fired?
do you
Kind of
get fired
leans
up
in with
about
the
it?
arms. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
kind of like the flex, like
Exactly. And that was it. Like, do you get fired up? Yeah. And that's, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the joy that the zeal that the Lord sort of infuses into the soul when he's drawing one of his creatures to himself.
Yeah.
yeah.
And that was all it took, you know? But yeah, there was certainly no like preparation in music school. There was certainly no certainty of my own sense of vocation back then, you know? There was a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty, but there's a real beauty in that, you know?
Yeah.
To just say, I trust you, Jesus, that you're not going to lead me astray, that you have good things in store for me, and that I can step out and make an act of faith in order to further your will in my life, to do what you have asked of me. So,
Right.
yeah,
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like the apostles, just like what you were saying. When they first met Jesus, they didn't really know what they were going to be called to. They didn't really know what their vocation was going to be. They just knew that, like, they've encountered Jesus, and like, where are you staying? I want to spend time with you. I want to be with you.
Right. And the formation happened as it went, right? Like,
exactly.
They weren't perfectly formed apostles like when they started following Christ, right?
Yeah.
And then the official call, the call of Peter to become the first pope wasn't until like 3 years down the road, right?
Right.
And so there was all of this time in between before Peter's heart was ready to receive the you are Peter, and upon this rock I build my church.
Right.
You know, so there's that seems to just, it makes sense, right? It makes sense, especially within relationship in general, and our own self-discovery in a way. Right? As we discover who Christ is, we also discover who we are in relationship to Him. So
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
There were so many moments in our spirituality year that were just so funny. Because I mean, you think about it, spirituality year is so strange in the sense that you could have a certain number of guys that have been in seminary already for 5 or 6 years, and they're in the spirituality year, and then you could also have a group of guys that this is literally their first experience of seminary. Right, that like they just pulled up and this is it.
Right.
And so, and that was the experience of Kyle and I, where, you know, I had been in college seminary at the Josephinum for a while, and then Kyle just kind of showed up and was like, "What's a breviary?"
Yeah.
It's just like, I just remember Kyle and I would both sit in the back of catechism class, and I'm like doodling because I took 4 years of catechism in college seminary. Like this, you know, I get it. Like it, you know, I went through all this. And Kyle, like, meanwhile, every day his mind was just being blown. And he was just like, what? Almost to the point of getting frustrated.
Yeah. Well, think about it, though. Like, I went through public school all the way through. So this is my first experience of any sort of Catholic education. Yeah. Which was... It was crazy. But yeah, I have really appreciated our friendship because I have a very distinct memory of, it was like day 2, I think, of seminary, maybe 3 or 4. And we were walking to get ice cream because ice cream solves all your problems. But
Bonnie Bray.
Exactly.
Bonnie Bray ice cream.
Yeah.
Or Sweet Cow. Sweet Cow's pretty good.
Yeah, but Bonnie Bray is like walking distance.
Yeah, Bonnie
so.
Bray's closer.
Right.
Yeah.
But I remember like walking at the back of the group with Ian and him like teaching me how to pray the Liturgy of the Hours. I had to like use the ribbons and flip back and forth between stuff. And And you said something like, "Don't worry, by Thanksgiving you'll probably kind of know how to do it." And I was like,
Kind of
I want to
know
know now. You know?
Right.
Oh, man.
But yeah, you're right. By Thanksgiving, I was like, I
So
sort of
confident
kind
here.
of know what a psalm is, you know? But yeah, there's been a lot of joy just being in the seminary and sort of letting everything grow with time. Our rector, Father Leonard, has used the analogy. So the word semen in Latin means seed, and you can see that in the word seminary. So seminary is supposed to be like a seed bed where the
Right.
seeds of the faith are sown in the man, like the parable of the sower. You know, and is it going to be fertile ground? And by God's grace, I think like the traditions and the teachings and the doctrines of the faith have been sort of sown in the heart, to the extent that they've begun to bore fruit as well,
Right.
which is a real
Yeah.
joy, you know. I think sometimes I get sort of bogged down by all of seminary life, but it's easy to miss the big picture of like the Lord has actually like radically changed who I am and
Yeah.
what I'm like, the pursuit of my life, you know. Which, yeah, I mean, glory and praise to him, all gratitude and thanks, because I couldn't have ever directed myself to my own like beatitude, my own happiness, you know.
Right.
Right. It's simply impossible.
Exactly.
It's
One does not simply just.
right. Yeah.
Walk into beatitude.
No, I mean we've talked about this a lot in Ian and I have been teaching RCIA a little bit at All Souls, and so that's one thing that we're continuing to emphasize almost like every class is that heaven is impossible for mere human beings. Like it's a supernatural end. It's a supernatural end. It's not a natural end, and so the incarnation, Jesus Christ, isn't just kind of like a nice addition. He's a necessity. Like Jesus Christ is a necessity for us to go to the end that we've been created for. Is only possible through God becoming man, and through His grace at work in our lives. And so there's no way that we can muscle our way towards salvation. There's no way that we ourselves can exceed perfectly in virtue to the point where we're able to achieve heaven. But it's solely a gift through Jesus Christ, through His church, through the grace flowing through the sacraments, through baptism, through life of prayer, that heaven actually becomes possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's really beautiful. The way that the Lord has taught me that lesson, the utter gratuity of His grace, has been with the example of one of His most ancient saints, Saint Mary Magdalene.
It's the name of my parish.
Shout
Shout out to
parish
everybody
is
that
Saint
goes to
Mary
St. Mary
Magdalene.
Magdalene in
Yeah.
Gilbert, Arizona.
Shout out.
Gilbert, Arizona.
Yeah. So right after I finished my year of teaching, my extensive career in education, I went
Teaching
to
hot cross buns to first graders.
Exactly.
My-
yeah, check the box off the bucket list. You know.
Right. I haven't done that in my life. I still don't know how to play hot cross buns on the recorder.
Well, I'm actually certified to be able to teach you, Micah.
Anyways, yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So I went to World Youth Day in 2016. So this was actually already after I had been accepted by the diocese to be a seminarian. I was coming to St. John Vianney in August. I think this was July. No. It was June of 16. I went to Krakow, Poland, and did just was participating in World Youth Day, and there was this really beautiful moment that the Lord really spoke to me really well. And so the city center in Krakow is beautiful. The cathedral is so magnificent.
Oh, love it. I was
and-
also there that summer.
Yeah. And one of the things that they had done, I don't even know who, but people leading World Youth Day they had brought in tons of relics for these like really well-known saints. So there was a huge line for Saint Therese of Lisieux.
Of course.
And
Of course.
Blessed Pier Giorgio
And
Frassati.
Pier
'cause
Giorgio Frassati, that's right.
his body was there. I was on
Yeah.
cloud 9.
It
man.
was
He was my
nuts.
saint when I was in college.
Exactly.
And
Exactly. And so I actually stood in both of those lines, saw both of those wonderful saints. But then on that same day, as I saw Therese and Frassati, I was just kind of walking outside of the main square in Krakow, and we were kind of walking past these churches and these little buildings, and there were some sisters that my buddy recognized their habit because his sister is a sister in that order. He has a sister, as they say. But so we went over and talked to the sisters, and at one point, one of the sisters just said, "Hey, have you seen the relics of Saint Mary Magdalene?" And I kind of lost it. I was like, "What? She's like 2,000 years old."
Yeah.
You know?
How do we have relics? Of
I'd
her?
never thought
Yeah.
about relics existing for somebody in the gospel, you know?
It's
Which was,
it's
it's just
crazy.
like, whoa, you know?
Yeah.
So I go in there, and it was there was no one really. It was a tiny little church, and this tiny little box. It was like, I don't even think it was glass. It was like clear plexiglass. And in the middle of this little box was this giant chunk of the top of a femur bone.
Oh
So
my
like
gosh.
the ball socket.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was huge. It was like, a couple of my fists big. And I remember just kneeling down in front of this thing and going, I can't believe what I'm seeing. It was the biggest relic, of course, I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And the most ancient saint I've really ever encountered. And little did I know that the Lord was going to use this saint to draw me to himself. So I came to seminary, and I had a really beautiful prayer experience, just praying with Mary Magdalene and what I had understood about her at that point. And then I came to seminary at some point during SY. I was praying again with some Mary Magdalene stuff, and just was hit with a desire to kind of study this person because, she's in the gospel. It's not like we have a volume of her works or anything like Teresa of Avila
Right.
or like
She's
the
a
autobiography.
mysterious figure.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like a lot of the other gospel.
Mhm.
Even the apostles themselves, besides John, didn't write, John and James. Okay, yeah, some of the apostles did.
Peter. Paul.
Wait a second.
Hold on.
But still, they're still pretty mysterious because
Right.
basically what we know of their lives is through tradition and a few of these writings that we have about them.
Yeah.
Some of the more modern saints,
Mm-hmm.
we got full biographies on them. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even autobiographies like
Right.
Saint Therese,
Yep.
John Bosco.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So I went to Cardinal Stafford Library at St. John Vianney Seminary, and the first book I picked up about Mary Magdalene was basically equivalent to something like Mary Magdalene, not who you think she is. And I was like, what on earth is this?
Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. So, I became aware of this centuries, millennia even, kind of discussion and debate about who Mary Magdalene is in the Gospels, because the church fathers are really divided on this. It's kind of usually the classical division on who she is like West fathers, Eastern fathers are differing on who she is in the Gospel. Everything I knew about her or thought that I knew about her was kind of just shattered right away. And I was like, holy cats, you know, like I don't even know what to talk about or what to look at. And I kind of just put it away. I was like, I don't even want to deal with this.
Right.
But yeah, so I started talking more about it with my spiritual director, and he just encouraged me to kind of go back to it. And so in short, Mary Magdalene, according to the Western Church Fathers, is 3 women in the Gospels. So one is a woman from Luke chapter 7, verses 36 through 50. And she's the unnamed woman who, the penitent woman who anoints the feet of Jesus with her tears and wipes them with her hair in the house of Simon the Pharisee. So that's one.
Yep.
A second is Mary of Bethany, to whom Christ visits her and her sister Martha in Luke chapter 10. And their sibling Martha and Mary is also Lazarus, right? From whom Christ raised from the dead.
Some people say that Mary of Bethany and Mary Magdalene are the same.
Yeah, so that's the third person.
The Western Church Fathers.
Yeah.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So she's Luke chapter 7, 36 through 50, unnamed woman. Mary of Bethany, Luke chapter 10, John chapter 11 and 12. And then also Mary Magdalene, Luke chapter 8, John chapter 20, from whom Christ exorcised 7 demons and to whom Christ appeared at the resurrection.
Right. At the tomb.
Exactly. And so, again, a long story short, the last 3.5 years of seminary have basically been me chasing this woman down because...
Or her chasing you down.
Hey!
No.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, the beauty of the communion of saints is as such, you know, it's not me. Yeah, like we said earlier, it's not me directing my own life to God. It's God drawing me to himself. Yeah, but so I've studied this for like hundreds of hours.
Right.
And
wow.
Yeah, like it has just pierced my heart to such a degree. And this is why. Because if she's those 3 persons in the gospel, there's this excellent, beautiful trajectory of her having this wild conversion of heart, which is something that I think the Lord has done in my life. I mean, everybody has vices and past sins, but the way that this trajectory plays out in these 3 women is, yeah, she comes to the Lord having 7 demons, right? And then he says, to whom much is forgiven.
Those who are forgiven much.
Love much.
Love much.
Yeah, something like that. I don't want to mess that up. But yeah, so she loves much, and then he forgives her sins, and then there's this immediate sense of her like being drawn to the Lord, because then in Luke chapter 10, when Christ visits Martha and Mary in Bethany, we're familiar with that story where Martha is, busy about the tasks of the house and trying to provide for the Lord. I think rightly so, and like according to her own sense of vocation, like service and hospitality. But our Lord says that Mary chose the better part, and what does she do? She sits at the feet of the Lord and listens to his teaching. And that has been how the Lord has advanced my own vocation. Eucharistic adoration, where you sit at the feet of the Lord, literally the Lord, there he is on the altar, and you listen to what he has to say, to what he has to teach you, about the church, but also to what he has to teach you about yourself. Something that I've been thinking a lot about recently is that identity precedes mission. This is a line from one of our spiritual directors, Father Barron, at the seminary. Identity precedes mission, which means I have to know who I am before I can do what I am called to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And this, again, this is how the Lord has advanced my vocation by sitting at his feet and listening to his teaching, listening to him tell me who I am, namely that I am a beloved son through virtue of my baptism, you know?
Right.
And then, yeah, I mean, like I said, when I came to seminary, I had no sense really of my vocation. I just had this come and see sort of mentality, if you will. But then on my silent retreat in my 3rd year of seminary, so it wasn't even during the 30-day silent retreat on at the end of spirituality year.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't in my 2nd year of seminary. It wasn't until my 3rd year of seminary, basically at the end of the year, where the Lord gave me the grace to be able to choose my vocation with certainty, which is incredible, you know? And I think there's this way in which he does that for Mary Magdalene too. He teaches who she is when she's sitting at his feet, right? And then what do you see? But she provides for him out of her means, right? She appears a couple of other different times, and then she anoints his feet again in Bethany before his passion.
Right before he's headed into to Jerusalem.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And this is kind of the points that are disputed by some of the fathers.
Of course. Yep.
We won't get into the details of all that right now, but like I said, there's this excellent, wonderful, beautiful trajectory of the turning back of her heart to the heart of Jesus. Metanoia, they call that in Greek. The conversion of heart, like the sense of turning back. And then where does she end up? She ends up at the foot of the cross after most of his apostles have fled.
She's there.
Yeah. And then she ends up at the tomb as well.
She's like one of the first ones to.
Yeah. The tradition of the church is that our Lord appeared to his mother first, which is not an account of Scripture, but it's handed down through apostolic tradition, and it makes a lot of sense. Exactly, right? It's like that, because she would have been the only one, basically, who hadn't despaired of the resurrection. You know?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, like she would have been the one that had, even though her heart was pierced as though by a sword. The Our Lady of Sorrows, right? The Immaculate Heart was pierced, even though she was pierced to such a degree of sorrow, she still had that hope that he was going to do what he said he was going to do. Right. Rise.
That fiat that she gave, that she said when the angel Gabriel appeared to her, wasn't just a one-time fiat, but it was a fiat that continually sang in her heart throughout her whole life.
Yeah.
Right. And so, And
I think when you hear about Our Lady pondering the mysteries in her heart, I think there maybe is a way in which Mary Magdalene learned that from her too.
Probably.
You know?
Oh man. Yeah.
Wow. Right.
That's such a cool thing to think about.
Isn't that beautiful?
They had to have spent so much time together.
Right. And I don't know how authoritative it is, but the Passion of the Christ, the film, is so beautiful in the way it portrays the relationship between the Magdalene and the mother.
Because she was already like in the Passion of Christ, you see Mary Magdalene almost as a daughter,
right?
To Mary, the mother of Jesus. Just the way that the way that they care for each other, but also the way that they're consoling the heart of Jesus as he's going through the Passion in the different moments.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it just gets back to everything is gratuitous. All the good things that I have come from God because he's drawing me to himself. He wants me to dwell with him in eternity forever, beholding his face. It's such a powerful image of adoration, right? Because what we do in Eucharistic adoration, I love this. We adore the hidden God, right? He's veiled under the appearance of bread in the monstrance on the altar, right? And so it takes faith to be able to believe that that is God because of what he said, because of how he revealed himself. But then heaven is the same thing. It's beholding the face of God, but he's no longer hidden.
Yep.
There's no mediation of the senses. I don't have to, what I perceive is not bread. It's the divine essence itself, but the mode is the same. I humbly sit at the feet of the Lord, listen to his teaching for all eternity. And it's just, it just has pierced my heart to such a degree that, that I can only say with Peter, after he gives the bread of life discourse in the latter half of John chapter 6, where he's teaching the Jews about the Eucharist. Most of the disciples leave, and then he turns to the 12 and says,
Yeah.
will you leave also? And Peter just says this beautiful line of, Lord, you have the words of everlasting life. To whom else shall we go? And that's it, right? That's what faith is now. Seminary and life in general, priesthood is not without suffering. It's not without the cross, but it is such a wonderful life because what God has said is true about himself. What God has revealed to the apostles and then been handed down through generation upon generation is the same faith. And yeah, he's inviting me to behold the truths of the faith for all eternity, because he is the way, the truth, and the life, like he says in John 14:6, And so, yeah, the Lord has used this woman to change my life.
Wow. Yeah.
And to give me certainty of my own vocation, right? Because mercy is possible for her, it's also possible for me. Because the forgiveness of sins took place in her life, it can happen for me as well. And because if, I think if we come back to the identity, if she's splintered, if the three are splintered, and she just, like Mary Magdalene, just some sort of powerful figure in the gospel that has always been a follower, has always been righteous, like some theologians have said, there's no conversion. There's no manifestation of the greatness of the mercy of God, which I so desperately need because I'm a sinner.
Yeah.
So, her example through the example of her conversion, her turning back to the Father, and then and also to Jesus, right? The Holy Trinity. And then becoming one of the most revered saints in all of Christendom, about whom the Lord says, the memory of her will never pass away, after she anoints him in John chapter 12.
Wow, yeah.
It's
I forgot about that line.
It's so amazing, how her life is just such a model for wicked sinners, like myself. It sounds sort of crass, but that's what sin does to the human person. It just disintegrates who the human person is, and so the Lord has used her to give me hope and faith and charity.
Yeah. Something I've just been, as you've been speaking, something I've just been thinking about is the fact that, so Jesus cast out these 7 demons from Mary towards the beginning of the Gospels. And one of the things that I love about Jesus is he calls you to follow him, but he says, go and sin no more. And he gives you the freedom of whether you're going to come back to him and keep following him. And he says, I've freed you. Mm-hmm. You're free.
Yeah.
You're free to do as you please, to make your own choice about where you're going to go. Are you going to return to where I've just set you free from, or are you going to follow me?
Yeah.
and what you see in Mary Magdalene is a constant, just like going, just incessantly, just going to the feet of Jesus, going after him with such zeal to the cross, and then after, one of the first ones to go to the tomb, and she was set free, and then she continually sought him. Obviously, I mean, we talked about this. We talked about grace.
Right.
Jesus working, his grace working in her heart, but she's responding in a way where she's constantly seeking him, seeking his face.
I mean,
it's that free choice. Like, grace is given, but it's still the free choice. And you mentioned this when you were talking about your own story, is that Jesus offered you, he offered you the grace of choosing your vocation to be a priest, and you had to respond in a certain way. And obviously, like, we leave the rest up to the discernment of the church and everything. But in a certain way, like, we do, like, when the grace is being offered, we have to choose it for ourselves. And it's not just something that God is going to force onto our lives and make us live out in a certain way. But it's always that loving choice, using our free will.
I mean, that's why the Catholic Church has always celebrated and revered the saints.
Right.
Because they're the ones who have chosen to follow Jesus, right? And most perfectly in Our Lady, right?
And Mary.
I mean, it's not worship, it's veneration, but it's because they're the ones that said, fiat mihi secundum verbum tuum. Let it be to me according to your word, right?
Look at this. You've grown in
Latin
so many
scholar, yes. Yes, good. The one phrase that I memorized.
It's so good to see you grow.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. So I mean, I just from reading the Gospels, I've learned a little bit about Mary Magdalene, but it's cool to see just the relationship that God has formed between you and one of his most venerated saints. And how that and how they lead us deeper into our vocation. It's so beautiful, and it's the pattern of mediation that Christ has established through the church, and then through in the church through different saints, through holy men and women, and so awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming on.
Praise
Thanks
God.
for doing our music for us.
Maybe we'll have a new tune for next season or something.
That'd be awesome. That'd be pretty
Freshen
cool.
it up every once in a while. That'd be cool.
Nice.
Yeah, the new hot beat from Kyle Tannehill
and Andrew Olson.
You guys could come up with a fun band name. That'd be hilarious.
Right,
yeah.
So who's the next Helena guy in line? That way we know who to schedule next.
Nice.
Right,
Dylan Armstrong.
Do you have any shout outs for people out there?
I have one.
Nice. Yeah, go, Micah. I need to think.
Okay. Just a sec. I wanted to shout out Dustin Krause. So Dustin Krause, this is kind of a cool story. I had forgot my breviary and my water bottle after the ordination in the Knights of Columbus Hall, really close to the cathedral. And I went back on Sunday just praying and hoping that that hall was going to be open, because when you it's kind of the funny thing about being a seminarian, when you lose your breviary, you're like, my life is ending. Oh my gosh. What am I going to do?
How can I pray?
I'm dramatizing a little bit, especially with that breviary. But so I went to the Knights of Columbus Hall, and there's these two guys working outside. And I went straight to the door to see if it was open, and then I went over, and I was like, hey guys, like, do you mind letting me in? I left my water bottle and breviary here. And Dustin goes, yeah, we can do that. And wow, your voice sounds really familiar. Like, where do I know that from? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I've ever met you before, Dustin. He goes, yeah, you're on Sons of Ours, aren't you?
Classic.
Yeah.
That's so
And
cool.
I'm like, oh yeah, like me and are the ones who started it.
Nice.
So it was cool. We had a great discussion afterwards, and Dustin is a really gifted artist too. He's done a lot of cool different religious art. Ryan Mack, one
That's
of the
right.
seminarians, has a piece of his in his room.
Dude,
and it's super beautiful.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
I just met Dustin
No way.
like 2 weeks ago because he was asking us about visual praise stuff.
oh,
nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So you go, Dustin.
Thanks for taking care of us.
Yeah, totally.
Paint or drawing the different religious art, giving me my water bowl, my brewery, and all the work that you're doing right now for the Knights of Columbus in the hall. So, shout out to Dustin.
Sweet.
Yeah. I want to shout out my friend Andrea Polito.
Oh,
Yeah, so she's a consecrated virgin in the Archdiocese of Denver, but also a super fan of Mary Magdalene.
well, because she's a consecrated virgin, like Mary
On her
Magdalene's,
feast
like, the
day.
original.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So Andrea was consecrated on July 22nd, the feast of St. Mary Magdalene.
Wow.
Yeah,
There you go.
and so Andrea's just been like a really great example, a sort of like spiritual sister to me. So thank you, Andrea, for your example, and thanks for praying for me.
Yeah.
Thanks for loving Lady Magdalene.
Yeah, another fellow lover of Magdalene.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Awesome.
I wanted to shout out several people, most of them not by name, but so if any of you listen to the Catholic Stuff You Should Know podcast, you know about the Cheez-It scandal and how I've been involved in that.
Yeah, you're a little
basically,
punk, huh?
basically I took a box of Cheez-Its that was on the community
Extra
table.
toasty Cheez-Its.
Yes,
Let's be
extra toasty
real.
Cheez-Its that was on the community table, and I put it in my personal cubby box because I figured the community table was just free grabs. But apparently it's not a free grab table. It means like it's for everybody, and I just stole it. So I've gotten a lot of flack from people that I haven't heard from in like 10 years. They'll just text me
That
and be
is
like,
so
"You Cheez-It
funny."
snatcher." Well, I want to shout out to Ben Horn, who's a good friend of mine, and he is the one guy who's come to defend me. And is
Nice.
actually on my side on it. So I just want to shout out to Ben Horn. Thank you so much for the support. This is very trying times.
Oh my gosh.
Kyle is also living at St. Joe's with
Yes.
Ian, so he
Yeah,
knows
he
all
was-
about the Cheez-It scandal.
We had a
I'm
whole
not
house
surprised.
meeting about it.
What's put on the community table does not mean you can put it in your own
Right.
cubby.
Exactly.
Well, okay, and here's the thing. Father John mentioned on his podcast that I reconciled and bought a box of extra toasty
That's
Cheez-Its
right.
for the house.
Yeah, that's just true.
That
I
is
can
not
corroborate
entirely
that.
accurate.
Oh.
I bought an extra large
Oh my
family-sized
gosh.
box of extra toasty Cheez-Its.
You're such a victim, Ian.
It was not a normal box.
That's
it
how you
was
should do
25%
penance.
bigger.
That's how you should do penance, above and beyond, right?
Yes.
Return back more than
More than what I took.
you had taken away. Just kidding. Awesome.
Anyway,
Yeah, thanks again, Kyle. It's been
Yeah.
a joy talking and
Yeah,
hearing
thanks so
more
much,
of your
guys.
story. I
Yeah.
mean, we've been in seminary a while. We lived together for 1 year, but it's cool to hear even more about how God has called you to the priesthood and just continued to form your heart while you've been in seminary.
Yeah, praise God.
Yeah, praise God.
all right. Well, thank you for listening to Sons of Ours podcast.
That's ours with an A. We'll see you next time.
Adios.